Welcome to the ZBA meeting for April 19th, 2018. And tonight we have our first applicant, 53 Porter Street. Any if you want. No?
Peter Martin of 11 Cave Street, Peter requests a special permit pursuant to Scituate zoning bylaws sections 460.2, 470.6F, and 950.2B. MGL Chapter 48, Section 6, finding in accordance with Scituate zoning bylaws sections 810.2 and 950.2D. And/or any other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to raise a dimensionally conforming single-family dwelling in the R2 residential zone, the salt marsh and tideland conservation, and the floodplain and watershed protection zoning districts at 67 Border Street in Scituate, Assessor's Map 6, Block 2, Parcel 8A, on a lot which is pre-existing non-conforming as to lot frontage, and the reconstruction of a dimensionally conforming single-family dwelling thereon, having an increase by more than 20% in the gross floor area.
Thank you.
Great.
Jeff.
Excellent. So Jeff DeLisi, I'm here on behalf of the applicants Peter and Monica Martin. And I'm also here with Paul Marabito of Ross Engineering. And I'll let Paul explain the project. Just a couple of procedural items. This was, we initially filed for a finding on this application because the lot is a grandfathered lot. 50-foot frontage lot, and but the house on the lot is conforming to all setbacks, but under section 810.2B we need a finding on that issue. Additionally, we've discovered that the property or the area where the house is presently located and proposed to be reconstructed is either entirely or partially located in the floodplain and watershed overlay, as well as the salt marsh and tideland overlay as shown on the zoning map. And so we've requested a special permit under each of those two sections at section 460 and 470. However, we don't think, and Paul can explain why, it's likely not located in those overlays. But nonetheless, as belt and suspenders, we believe that we meet the requirements under the bylaw for the issuance of a special permit, so we're requesting it.
Okay, even if they're located in those areas? Or
Right, because under the zoning map they are, even though our good science in this day and age tells us that we're not. Paul can explain that, but if you want to explain.
This is the outline of the lot is shown in yellow. To the south is the Gulf River, which they own on to. On three sides of the property, on the west, the south, and the east, they're all bordered by marsh. This solid line here is the edge of the wetland, which was flagged.
Which direction, Paul, are the wetlands then? Below that?
Yeah, these are the wetlands here.
Outside the blue?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
This green line is the zone district line for the salt marsh and tideland. It's defined as being 10 feet above mean low water. And mean low water is defined by a specific elevation, which is 5.1. It's actually a minus 5.1. So when you subtract a plus 10 from that, it comes up to be 4.9 feet is the contour, which this green line is. This is all surveyed. We've actually done a full topographic survey of this because we are in front of Conservation Commission. So all of these areas have been mapped out based upon field survey. And again, the zoning map has the zone map does show the boundary of that. A salt marsh and tideland zone will be 10 feet above mean low water. I have a copy of that map that I can show you. Also, the blue line represents the area of the floodplain and watershed protection district. The boundary of that is the 10-foot contour. Everything within this circle, if you will, is above elevation 10. The rest of the lot drops down about 8 here, and then it goes up the hill to the street. And again, this is based upon the zoning bylaw, a description of the fact that it is shown to be in it, but the boundary is the 10-foot contour, so everything above 10 would be out of it. The ground you see is the actual house. This is the proposed house. This is the proposed garage. And the large areas would be open decks. The garage is detached from the house. And this crosshatched area is an existing house. It's an open deck garage. That can be raised, and in this place will be the house that's shown in the brown and the orange. We also show the setbacks from the front yard, rear yard, and side yards, which exceed by far the required setbacks. We also have a zoning chart on the plan, and there's an increase of 47.6% of the gross floor area for the new dwelling. I can show you this. This is the floodplain and watershed protection district map, which shows us to be in it. This is the 10-foot contour, and the red dot, you can see how it goes around it. That red dot there is where the existing and proposed house will be. This is the 1972 floodplain and watershed protection district map. This is what's referenced in the zoning bylaw. It is not the 2014 zoning map. This is a specific map for the overlay district. This is the back side of the map. The front side of the map is your zoning map. Again, this is from 1986. And what it shows is up in here, where we're down here on Border Street, right in this area here, and there's a note here that says the green area is the Salt Marsh Conservation District, and what it shows is that the boundary is 10 feet above mean low water. So what we did was, based upon the contour elevations that we took, and knowing what the elevation for mean low water is, we subtracted that from 10, and that's how we came up with this green line on our plan that shows where the physical boundary is for that zoning district, which is downhill from the wetland line. This black line here is the actual edge of vegetated wetland, and the salt marsh is just to the south of the wetland itself. So the zone district line is pretty accurate for this side, which is where the salt marsh and the wetlands are. I think with that, I'll end, and we can answer any questions you may have.
Can I see the map? Oh, you have copies for us?
This is a copy of the same map colored. That's the floodplain.
That's the 1972 map.
Yes. This is a copy of a portion of that. The second map, I have a black circle around the locus. Again, you see the driveway coming down, there's a small dash line.
Yeah, how could you ever find, I'm not sure how you could ever find it on this map.
So what it tells you is that it's a 10-foot contour.
Oh, that's the point of this map, then?
Yes.
It's just the 10-foot contour, yeah.
That shows us whether or not we're in it, but when you're very close to it, we go out and we actually locate the boundary. The zoning bylaw says it's shown and noted.
Yeah.
And that map, the back of this map,
Yeah.
just so you know, boundaries in the floodplain district, one is either a specific contour, whether it's 10 feet or 100 feet, or it's so many feet, or the other bound is so many feet from the center line of the brook, and the other one is a certain distance behind the seawall. This area is 50 feet behind the seawall. Those are the key boundaries that mark the floodplain watershed protection district, shown in the 1972 map.
So in essence, you've marked the 10-foot boundary in green on your map in the field.
Yes.
Jeff, could you guys submit a copy of the topo map for our file?
Yeah, did you just do that, Paul? This one here?
No, the topo of the whole property.
I've got.
I think they're doing that for conservation.
Right, but I think we should have one, I mean, because that's kind of an issue in this, you know.
Topographic map?
Yeah,
Yeah, this line represents the contour. We have a note on here, it says the boundary of the salt marsh and tideland conservation zoning district. It's elevation 4.9.
If we have his certified plan certifying as to those two zones, which are based on elevation, what do we need the rest of the top?
well, the plan I have says it's not. I mean, unless there was a new plan, but the plan I have says it was
The
not in the
amended.
I just
floodplain.
amended this.
So this is the amended, all right, that's what you're
That's
looking
what-
for, file.
Sure, the amended plan you have has that first one on it with the floodplain district.
That's
Right,
no-
with the salt marsh.
So this is
So
the
that's
most
no- that's
current
no
plan
two
with
amended?
the full, all of the lines.
Yeah,
Great.
that's-
That was
that's
gonna be
the-
my next question.
Yeah, that's the plan that the zoning decision will reference if it's an approved.
The one that he handed us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
That-
It's the third and final plan set that will come to you on this project.
Do you think in this case, there's a practical difference whether we decide it's in the floodplain or not in the floodplain?
I think that you need to, if this was a more, I think that you need to determine that it is in the floodplain and issue a special permit, because from the applicant's standpoint, what I don't want from a legal standpoint is a finding that it's not in the floodplain, and then have somebody challenge the permit on the basis that it is.
Right.
So I think that we need to request and be granted a special permit and have the 20-day appeal period run, and then we're good from there.
Yeah. So you are now requesting a floodplain special permit?
Yeah, that was requested in the amended notice, which was published, and so the answer is yes.
Okay, yeah.
Even though it's, I understand the precaution, it makes sense, even though it's not in the floodplain.
That is correct.
Okay.
Even though our determination on our best science is that it's not in the floodplain, and in addition to all of that, it's a pre-existing nonconformity, because the property was developed in its existing state prior to the adoption of both of those overlay districts. So really, it's probably a finding in any event, but just to be on the safe side, I think it's prudent to go the special permit route.
I just also want to add that, given that it's a 50-foot frontage, I went back and was able to find that in 1950, effective 1956, June 22nd, it was only a 50-foot frontage requirement.
Right.
And so the fact that it's 58,
Yeah, I think that's what, section 6-2 or something to that effect.
I didn't
Yeah.
write that,
Yeah.
I didn't write it down.
So the-
I just looked at it.
Well, that's very diligent, and I concur, because I looked at the same.
Yeah.
same file.
Did you guys give notice to COMCOM and the planning board on this?
Well, as a result of the filing, they were hand-delivered copies.
Okay.
For my own understanding, why is planning board involved?
Because it's required under the,
No understanding why it's involved. but
Right.
But the
Except the
zoning
rules.
bylaw requires it.
Right.
For some reason or another.
section 460.
Notice, but not necessarily a
It doesn't
hearing,
say notice when, it doesn't say notice of what.
just notice.
Just notice has to be
Okay,
provided.
that's what I understand. You are, you are optimistically hoping you do not have to go before the planning board.
I'm certain that I
Okay,
don't have to
there
go
we go.
before the planning
That was
board.
my question.
Yes.
Thank you.
But you've submitted plans and notice to them.
Yeah, yes, on all special permit applications, all applications I think that Annie receives is, I have to
We're supposed to.
file like 10 copies of
And one-
plans, and they get distributed to the town boards. for referral comments back to you. And presumably, if you haven't received any comments, then there are no comments that anyone
They're probably
really
going to
cares
take it
to
up
share
next
with you.
meeting.
Yeah. What?
Be about right. I said they're probably going to take it up next meeting.
Hopefully not. I know you're trying to be funny.
No. Wasn't that funny?
That's me.
Okay.
Not at this point.
Well, hey, too late. Too late for them.
Any other questions on the map? I think that was-
I just have a
Did you-
comment, yeah. I know if you're looking for the special permit with the floodplain watershed protection district, note 2 on the amended plan still says that it does not lie within the floodplain and watershed protection district. I don't know if that's something that,
If that's the case, because I haven't laid my eyes on the amended
Yeah,
plan,
I'm just wondering.
if that's the case,
clean it
then it
up.
should be cleaned up.
Yeah.
And if you want, you can condition this on us submitting the proper plan with the proper note.
So deleting that note 2,
No, just amending it.
amending it to,
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I,
It's killing me a little bit that I understand why the applicant wants the protection, but we're applying a standard that doesn't apply.
Well,
well,
it
that's
does
a
apply.
question. Yeah.
Without any question, you need to grant a special permit here. I was prepared to make the argument, I don't need it, but as I thought it through, your zoning map says we're in this zone. And even though there's a discrepancy that could be made, because your zoning
The
map says
color,
it.
so the color
we are
coding
there.
says we're in the zone?
Exactly.
I got you.
right, and
Alright.
that's probably just a print of the ink on the, they can't get that close.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a scale issue.
Yeah.
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 All right.
But Doherty, the Doherty case says, if it's on that colored map, I believe that it says it's in it.
Wasn't involved in Doherty.
Yeah.
And haven't read the decision, don't know what it says.
Yeah. I think in some ways, given the circumstances of this case, first of all, it's already developed land, it's not vacant land. But just everything else, again, I don't see that there's a big distinction.
Right, with the color, I understand.
Maybe we can, as they say, when they amend 2, we can reference the map stating that the zoning map states that it's in
Yeah.
the.
Or you can just make a finding, but either way.
Any other, anything else?
no.
Any questions from the audience on this application? Bob, did you have any?
No, John, not on the application. When we see the plans in our office, it's an A12 that moves the first living floor. We set the basement floor at 13.1 or 13.5.
Yeah.
The amended building code has it now 2 feet above, is it?
Not in an A zone.
Not in an A
I
zone.
think it's
Just
the
a
1 foot?
1 foot in A zone.
Yeah. Does anyone want to make a motion then?
Sure. I could try with our new
Format?
guide here. On the application for a special permit for the property at 67 Border Street, I move that the board find that the existing property is non-conforming as to lot frontage, and that's it, I believe. And that the structure is otherwise conforming, and that the board find that the proposed raise and reconstruct of the dwelling shown on a plan by Ross Engineering dated March 7th, 2018, as I should say, as on the amended plan dated March 7th, 2018, will not create any new nonconformities, and to the extent that it intensifies the existing lot frontage nonconformity, such intensification will not be substantially more detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood. Further, I move that the board grant its special permit for the reconstruction under section 470.6 and under section 460.2.
And the only thing I would add to that would be, and the board satisfied with the section 950.3 criteria for special permit. If
And-
you want, I can happy to go through those.
Sure, I was sort of taking that as a given in that we're
And
granting a
that's
special
what I
permit.
think it is too.
But, so I would revise my earlier that the board grant a special permit in compliance with section 950.3.
Thank you.
Of course.
And did
I
you
would-
want to make note on the plan
Note
adjustment?
2,
Yeah,
Note 2?
amendment, yeah.
a condition of our granting of that special permit would be a further amendment to the plan, correcting note 2 or deleting it in its entirety.
Great.
I would object to deleting it because now we're saying it is in, so it should say it is in. Can't delete it altogether.
Well, then we'd move that it be amended to say that it is in the floodplain and watershed protection district.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None?
Thank you, everybody. We greatly appreciate it. We'll get out of here quickly tonight.
Will you be submitting that decision?
Yeah,
Fantastic.
sometime shortly, next couple weeks.
Andy, did you get a copy of that? He gave you a copy? Okay.
just gave that to me.
Oh, you
I'll take
have
another
it?
one.
No, that's yours.
Jeff, do you want this plan he handed tonight?
If you don't want it, I'll take it.
You absolutely have
Yeah,
those.
that way,
Thank you.
Conservation.
Let me just make sure. What's that?
Line your ad with
I
it.
think that's the,
Oh, I'm a title attorney. They have plenty of old surveys to color the back of, but thank you.
To cover the back.
Yeah, they just draw big 22 by 36 sheets of paper.
Put it up on the easel and go to town.
Yep.
the title question of this.
Paul, are you sticking around for this next one?
I don't think so.
Steve doing it? You
Yeah,
good?
but isn't this your plan?
Pardon?
That's your plan, though.
Yes, it is.
I have a question on
Who's gonna pay for Paul's time?
it. Not me.
Application number 2.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay. Subject to correction on that one. Okay. All this, no one's paying me to be here.
All right.
These plans are really.
We got a second applicant this evening. Andy, if you want to,
Long time ago.
Diamond Development,
Not that long, so.
PO Box 1480 in Duxbury, requests a special permit or finding pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6, to raise and reconstruct the pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling at 53 Border Street in Scituate, Assessors Map 2, Block 2, Parcel 6, increasing the gross floor area by more than 20%. In accordance with Section 32050-8B of the city's stormwater bylaws, stormwater issues will be discussed as part of public hearings on the project.
thank you. You'd like to?
Start? Sure. Steve Bjorkland. First, I'll try and get out of the way
Your
the,
address, too. Address.
38 Lads Way, Scituate.
Oh, thank you.
At the end of the ad, it talks about stormwater in there. And in the planning board regulations that the ex-town planner came up with, there's a requirement that if you have another public hearing involved, that you're supposed to put in the ad that you may discuss stormwater. And I think it was kind of a mistake, because it was supposed to be if it was, you were in front of the planning board, but it doesn't say if you're in front of the zoning board for a public hearing that you're not supposed to put it in the ad. So even though we're probably not gonna talk about stormwater, it's a requirement that I have it in the legal ad. So that's the only reason why it's there.
Okay, so you're not planning to ask us?
And we're not required to have a stormwater permit, but if for some reason somebody wanted to talk about stormwater, it just, again, I have to have it in the legal ad.
Okay.
So that's the reason it's there, so I just want to clear that part of it up anyway. And again, this is 53 Border Street. This is actually 2 doors away from the one that you just heard about, from Mr. Marabito. It's almost identical as far as the relief that we're seeking as far as the house and the zoning bylaw is concerned, except for the floodplain. We're at elevation 20. The basement's at elevation 20. We're actually way up above the floodplain and not shown in it, so it's really a section 6 issue. The existing house on the plan is actually 14 feet from the sideline, which I can point to right here for you. It just misses it 14.4, it's supposed to be 15 feet from the side. And we're constructing a new dwelling, again, which meets and far exceeds all of the setbacks. The nonconformity we have is we also have a 50-foot lot that has twice the area. It's got 44,000, almost 45,000 square feet of land area. And I think we kind of got caught on a technicality in here because of the 50-foot lot, but that's what we're seeking the relief for. So we're looking to go larger than 20% of an increase, which is why we're in here. But we're taking a non-conforming dwelling with a setback and making it a conforming setback all the way around.
Isn't it also non-conforming as to lot width by about a half a foot?
No,
You've got it as 174.5.
it's a 125-foot lot within this district.
Oh, because I had 175.
175 is in the west end.
In the west end, okay, so I must have misread the notes in the bylaws. I just thought it was weird, it's, 6 inches.
I would have pushed it a foot back if that was the case. I mean, our objective here is we're trying to move the house further away from the
Yeah.
wetlands and the coastal bank and all that. So I moved it as far forward as I could. The septic system's actually in front of the house. Otherwise, we could have came further forward, but we're trying to leave some distance between the house that's in front of it as well. And so it's kind of a balance.
Yeah, no, it's a good location.
And
I
it ends
think.
up, yeah, centered in the lot. So I think it fits where it is. So this is, for me, this is, as far as the zoning goes, is one of the simpler ones, I guess.
Especially for you.
Absolutely. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I mean, I think it's,
I take it as part, you take it down the shed as well?
yeah.
Okay.
The only thing what I was going to ask about Paul, I noticed in the last one, he puts in the floodplain. He says it's not in the floodplain and watershed protection district. This one, he doesn't even mention it. I wonder if it makes sense to, since its overall location, just to add that note.
He could do it, but we're a ways away from it, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm certainly willing to put that in.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a good idea, just to clear it up.
Yeah, just so nobody questions it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a,
Yeah, no, I have no problem with that.
okay. And does not lie, it does also not lie in the marsh, salt marsh and tide, so it does not lie in the floodplain, it does not lie in the salt marsh, right?
Well, the salt marsh is a totally different zoning district.
Oh, it
So I
is.
don't think you need to have that on there.
No, you have it listed, zoning classification, R2, salt marsh and tideland conservation district. So I was a little
You know what?
That's the wrong plan.
am I looking at,
Yeah.
I'm at 67 border? Never mind,
53.
never mind. This one, okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wait a minute, I didn't
So you-
notice that on
No,
there,
but
but.
guess what? It still has it. Note number
No,
one.
Right over here.
Is that another one again?
Right.
One is zoning for
How many, too many
classification,
maps?
R2.
67,
Yeah, because
67.
we got 3 from Paul last time.
Okay, that's the problem.
Plotted us with plans.
I actually did look at your map, so somewhere in
Here
here.
it is over here, too.
Okay. I always color them, so I don't know what happened to it. Here it is. All right, so,
But it doesn't lie in the water protection district.
What are you gonna do with this? Are you gonna keep the
Does
septic
not.
system, or you move it?
Brand new septic system,
And that's going in front?
yes,
All right.
yes. That's already been designed and approved,
So you've been to the Board of Health for the septic system?
yes.
okay.
And so your front, again, your frontage is 58 feet? That,
And again, 1956, the bylaws only required a 50
50
foot.
feet?
Yeah, normally if there was no dwelling, we'd be in for a 610-2B to build on a 50-footer, but,
Right.
I think you're seeing a couple of these now that are coming forward on 50-foot lots or greater. It's, again, we're kind of caught in the technicality.
Right,
It's not necessarily a non-conforming lot, it's a 50-foot lot.
right.
Yeah.
Which was conforming back in 1957 when it was built.
Yeah, and allowed by special permit now.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
No.
Bob, did you have any comments?
No, I'd like to see on the plan, the delineation between the 8 and 12 and X in terms of flood zones. And whether the house is completely annexed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any comments or questions? Just state your name and address
I will.
for the record.
My name is Jim Spellman, and I live at 49 Border Street. And my wife and I have lived at this property for 36 years. We sit here. Our property borders the entirety of this eastern property and the entirety, save that little piece of the southern property. So we have, we believe, considerable standing in this matter. And I do have some prepared remarks, if you will allow me. I hope, in fact, that I can upset an apple cart a bit. Mr. Borkland is proposing to raise and remove the present structure at 53 Border Street adjacent to our home at 49, and then to build another much larger structure on the site in a different location. I have my own. Petition before you strikes us as somewhat premature in that after 3 hearings before the Conservation Commission and yet another scheduled for next week, no determination has been rendered as to whether this proposal can even go forward, and significant barriers remain there. Here's what Mr. Borkland is proposing. He intends to raise and remove a 175-year-old post and beam home of potential historic interest to the town, which sits on an environmentally sensitive, non-conforming lot abutting the fragile wetlands of the Gulf. Instead of rebuilding on the present, already disturbed footprint of the existing structure, as the Conservation Commission's peer review authority, Lucas Environmental, has strongly advocated as environmentally best, he argues that to do so would be more environmentally harmful than his proposal, and that it would pose undue hardship for him, including having to remove the concrete slab on which Mr. Borkland claims the house is built. In order to construct this house, Mr. Borkland intends to hammer or blast into solid bedrock for a lateral depth of 20 to 25 feet and a vertical height of 10 feet, of at least 10 feet. He then proposes to build foundation walls extending from that base to a height of 8 feet above grade at the front of the property and approaching 18 feet at the back of the property, just to bring him to the first floor. Town building code would allow him to create a structure as high as 40 feet above this, which is to say nearly 50 feet above the present height of land toward the street and close to 60 feet toward the marsh. In order to build this and create the septic system he's designed, he proposes to cut down or jeopardize virtually every mature tree on the lot. He intends to truck in, by his own estimation, over 1,000 cubic yards of fill to a depth of 8 feet across whole portions of the property. Our calculation suggests it could be more. In order to accomplish this, he proposes to build retaining walls along both the eastern and western property lines to hold back the fill, and essentially to regrade the whole 1 acre parcel right to the top and even overrunning the coastal bank. And Mr. Borkland has argued that this proposal will create what he calls, quote, an environmental enhancement to this fragile piece of property. Zoning Board of Appeals is being asked to grant a special permit to allow Mr. Borkland to build this structure, a much larger structure than the 2,400 square foot 2-bedroom home presently on the site, closer to the road and to the neighbors and many feet above the present grade. His proposal clusters the new home closer to the neighbors, compromising the privacy they currently enjoy. In so doing, he will be significantly obstructing the neighbors' views and the scenic views of the river from Border Street, which is parenthetically, one of our scenic roadways. He will be cutting or jeopardizing virtually every mature tree on the lot and destroying most every natural feature of the property as exists today. Proposal will inexorably alter the semi-rural nature of the neighborhood, increase light pollution to the neighbors. None of these things should pass muster with the planning board. Each is quite specifically highlighted in the zoning bylaws as a concern to be minimized whenever and wherever possible. This zoning board of appeals is being asked to determine whether Mr. Borkland's request for a special permit meets the standards of Mass General Laws, section Chapter 48, Section 6, as his petition before you declares. This is ironically the very statute which includes the famous second except clause, made most famous by the Massachusetts State Judicial Court ruling against this very applicant, Mr. Borkland, in the 2008 adjudication rendered in Borkland versus Norwell Zoning Board of Appeals. That ruling seems very well known to every planning board in the Commonwealth. It evoked at the time headlines such as, quote, "The SJC closes the front door to mansionization," in publications throughout the state. The specifics of that case are in most ways quite similar to the present circumstance. The applicant was attempting to tear down a modest house on a non-conforming lot and build a new and much larger one to replace it. The issue then, as here, is whether the proposal substantially increases the non-conforming nature of the structure and of the site. In the Norwell case, it was the size of the property, the size of the proposed home that originally brought the neighborhood and the town to attention. Mr. Borkland will argue that existing houses along Border Street are more in keeping with the house he proposes to build, and that approval of his request for a special permit should therefore be quite straightforward. But in the Norwell decision, height, length, and placement of the house, the effect that increases in noise and light might have to the neighborhood, the impact on the wetlands, all these and more were taken into consideration and determined to be legally tenable grounds for denying the permit and supporting the Norwell Zoning Board's finding that the proposed reconstruction would be substantially more detrimental, that is, more non-conforming to the neighborhood than the existing house. That same standard should apply here. We have the privilege of living in a remarkably wonderful town, blessed with natural beauty, good people. Scituate's a national leader in its efforts to protect its natural resources, something we should all be proud of. As a town, we fight to keep our drinking water clean and plentiful, our harbor and our coastal waters unpolluted, our energy clean and sustainable, our refuse manageable and recyclable, our highways clean. We pride ourselves in living in a town where such sensibilities seem not only right but essential. For all of us, this is our neighborhood. For over 30 years, I've been an active member of the Gulf Association, which is the neighborhood group of citizens dedicated to preserving and protecting the fragile wetlands of the Gulf River on which we live. For many years, I was its president. I retained the honorary position of board member emeritus. I've spent all of those years encouraging my neighbors to accept their inviolable responsibility to preserve the health of the fragile tidal estuary on which we live. By maintaining an undisturbed vegetative corridor between our homes and the river that the Massachusetts Wetland Protection legislation requires, by agreeing not to fertilize our lawns or use pesticides. In short, by understanding that our neighborhood extends beyond the brick and mortar of the house next door. The wetlands behind my house have become for me a sacred trust. My neighborhood extends there. Mr. Borkland wants you to approve this request for a special permit based on the narrowest interpretation of the permitting process. The SJC's finding in Borkland versus Norwell, however, invites broad scrutiny of the impact special permits to rebuild on non-conforming lots have to the neighborhood and to the community. This is what you are being asked to decide here this evening. Mr. Borkland asks you to agree that his proposed structure and the mountain of dirt that comes with it and the assault on the bedrock and the deforestation of the property is no more non-conforming to the land in the neighborhood than the modest existing home that has been sitting discreetly at the edge of the marshland for the past 70 years. The home of our former neighbors, Neil and Amanda Gray, who loved and cherished it all those years. Since my wife and I presume considerable standing in this matter and that we border the property in its entirety to the east and the south and would be quite adversely affected by this project, we also respectively submit that as an additional consideration, you should deny this proposal outright unless there's compelling evidence that rebuilding on the present site creates undue and insurmountable hardships to the developer. Mr. Borkland's arguments before the Conservation Commission to this issue of hardship have been reduced to just two. First, he says it'll be harder for him to build on the present footprint as the current house sits closer to the wetlands, claiming his proposal would bring an environmental enhancement to the neighborhood. Second, he says it'll be difficult to remove the slab underneath the present house in order to rebuild there. In a letter to the Conservation Commission dated 2/14 defending this proposal after Lucas Environmental asked pointedly why he couldn't rebuild on the present already disturbed site, he wrote the following, I quote, "The applicant has reviewed the existing house location and determined that reconstruction would require a new foundation along with significant earthwork such as blasting on and immediately near the top of the coastal bank, since the existing house is on a slab foundation. Due to these site constraints, the existing location is not a feasible option for redevelopment," end of quote. To those contentions, we make the following observations. Number one, Mr. Borkland is insisting that his alternative will be better for the site and for the wetlands. One of the issues still quite unsettled before conservation is whether it's even true that his proposed structure is further from the wetlands. We can demonstrate that wetlands flags have been moved and removed, both before and after a town requested on-site visit by Lucas Environmental. Mr. Borkland claims the project sits further from the coastal bank and therefore an enhancement to the neighborhood. 3 different coastal bank maps were submitted based on one survey. Each newer version running conveniently closer to the current structure. An independent consultant that we enlisted has affirmed that the maps are inaccurate and need further review. Regardless, for Mr. Borkland to argue that to blast the ledge, cut down all the trees, and bring in well over 1,000 yards of fill would be less of a hardship for him than to build on the present site, where most likely none of these things would be required, seems more than a bit disingenuous, at least to us. Number 2, his second argument is that the slab foundation under the present house creates an undue hardship to remove and to build over. According to town records and our personal knowledge, the existing house is on a pier foundation, not a slab. We are concerned that these are deliberate attempts by a developer to mislead this town solely for personal profit, to the detriment of the neighborhood. Whatever the decision of the Conservation Commission, we submit that through those hearings, the lines for your decision have been clearly drawn. Twice, the Conservation Commission has asked for peer review of this project. Twice, Lucas Environmental has come back asking pointedly, as we do, why the footprint of the existing house can't be utilized instead of rebuilding elsewhere. Here's what they have said. Quote, "The new location will require what appears to be a significant land alteration. The applicant is proposing to raise the grade around the proposed house by up to 7 feet in some locations. Much of the grading will occur along the eastern property line within a steep, rocky slope. The grading will extend down to and to the limit of the top of the coastal bank. This will result in the clearing of several large diameter trees and underbrush, which represent the only portion of the buffer to the coastal bank that is naturally vegetated under existing conditions, end of quote. This is Lucas, this is their peer reviewer. Mr. Borkman may try to tell you that he's made accommodations to those concerns, that they no longer exist. But any suggestion in whatever incarnation that this proposal does not create a considerably greater area of disturbance to this environmentally sensitive site is absurd. There is absolutely no credible argument that it is environmentally better for the site, for the neighborhood, or for the Gulf. There's in fact every argument that is considerably more harmful. Mr. Borkland has a perfectly acceptable alternative. By rebuilding on the present footprint, no trees need to be cut, no fill needs to be trucked in, and none of the still undisturbed vegetative barrier to the wetlands needs to be compromised. By each of these measures, the structure he proposes to build is decidedly more non-conforming to the neighborhood than what exists today. We ask therefore that you reject outright this petition, for a special permit. We believe this is what Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 6 requires.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think two things. One, the nonconformities that we're looking at that came before us was the setback.
And frontage, though that's a unique.
Unique situation. So the one nonconformity that he's eliminating, so he's improving that nonconformity as far as zoning is concerned. And the frontage, again, was pre-existing that he's unable to do anything about. So as well as,
If I'm,
I'd like to just, how much further can we go other than those two things to
Yeah, so
look at there? I don't.
you spent a considerable amount of time on that. It was very well written. I understand some of your concerns. Concerns that Concom has on this site or not is, even if we agreed with them and agreed with you on those matters, it's simply not before us. Even if we wanted to rule or comment or deny a special permit based on those, we would be out of line in doing that. We're here for the review of the nonconformities of the site and how his proposed raise and reconstruction affects those nonconformities. Now, you do raise a point as to substantially more detrimental. And yeah, if everything he said there, or some of what he said there that related to setbacks, we found to be substantially more detrimental, then I think you would be right in that it would be our duty to deny the special permit. But I disagree with some of your points on the intention of 48 Section 6 in terms of what is substantially detrimental and courts' interpretations of the substantially detrimental standard. It's not, we're not here to find that it's more detrimental to you to have a bigger house closer to your property line. It's the overall neighborhood, and it's more detrimental with respect to the nonconformities.
I agree.
We have a house now that is on a very large lot that is in violation of a setback. He is proposing to move that house, and I have to be honest, yes, it's certainly a significant increase. This is a very standard size for a new house in Scituate, especially on a lot with this much square footage. It's just not shocking to me in the least. And he's eliminating the only nonconformity he can eliminate, and he's putting the house in the middle of a lot. He's not putting it anywhere near your property line in terms of what's standard in the neighborhood or in the eyes of the code. There is nothing in the code, it's certainly not in the portions of the code that we have the ability to enforce regarding deforestation, as you put it. You raised some questions on height, which I think we probably have some questions for Bob about, and those are certainly valid concerns. I think grading sort of falls under that. You raised some issues as to privacy and views. Your rights to privacy and a view are, I would say, a distant second to his rights to build on a property that he owns. And his rights to build on a property within the code absolutely trump your right to privacy and views. That's unfortunate, and we've all caught the short end of that stick, but I think that's just the way it stands. Light pollution, he will absolutely have to abide by the code, but the light pollution under the code doesn't mean you can't see the lights inside his house from your house. It means that light that he creates can't go beyond a certain distance. I was trying to take notes and address your concerns.
May I respond?
Yes. Yeah.
Was there any other
Yeah.
comments too, Tom?
No, I think I'd echo a lot what Anthony said. I mean, this lot is double in size what a normal buildable lot is. You know, look at the square feet of the proposed house. I mean, this is less than what was just before us on the lot 2 doors over. On that street, and looking at the houses on that street, those are some fairly large houses. I don't think that it's too far off. And then looking at the building envelope, I mean, this house could have been much bigger. So, I mean, I know one of the issues that you said was light pollution. My guess, as a builder, I'm sure Mr. Bjorkland, or through Concom, he's going to file some sort of landscape plan with some sort of screening, especially in between the lots. I don't know if that's something that you plan on doing?
There is some, I wouldn't call it screening, but we have a proposal to do
I meant like
landscaping
plant.
along the top of
Right.
the coastal bank.
Yep.
For environmental reasons, like when we take the house down, that area is going to be replanted and go back to a natural state where it sits on top of the coastal bank.
And I'm guessing is there some sort of conditions you've talked about replanting other trees relative to ones
yeah.
that you take down, right?
Yeah.
So,
And I would just quickly say, my neighbor had chatted about conservation hasn't completed their process yet, so why am I here? That's, putting the cart before the horse. The reality is, the reason the Conservation Commission left their hearing open is because they want me to receive my approval from you guys before they close the hearing, because if you change something on it, I have to start their whole process over. What the regulation states is that I have to file for all my special permits. It doesn't say I have to have them, it says I have to file for them, but to work with the Conservation Commission, I agreed to leave the hearing open at Conservation until you actually gave the permit, because their next meeting is next Monday, so there's not that much of a difference between the two. So I just felt we might as well just leave it open for that.
Sarah, did you have-
I just have a couple of things. Number
Sure.
one, even if we grant this, if he doesn't get permits from conservation, it's dead, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, or you appeal it, and,
Yeah.
which you'll often do. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose on that. But the only disagreement I really have with Anthony is in Massachusetts, at least in this town, there is no view easement. So if he blocked your view entirely, there's nothing we can do about it. Just the Scituate does not have, you do not have a right to maintain a view. Which,
Just to be clear, I agree with that completely.
Yeah,
I didn't mean
yeah.
to say anything
yeah,
otherwise.
yeah. So, I first of all, your statement was extremely well prepared and well stated. And I'm really glad that there are people like you that are concerned about these types of things. And I hope that you will, and I know, I can tell already, that you're gonna see out the Concom, and much of what you're concerned about, I think, has got to be addressed in COMCOM. It's not things that we can address. We might say, yeah, you get the special permit, and they may look at it and say, yeah, given the, the land, you can't put it right there, you have to move it a little bit. I think if we grant it, we could premise it broadly enough that if you had to make changes via COMCOM, you wouldn't have to come back here.
If I can push back,
Just
please.
1 second, if Sarah's done. Are you all set?
Yeah.
Is just a question on the height. You made some mentions of 40, 50, and 60 feet, actually, I think.
That's
And
right.
so, Bob, I apologize because we ask you this about once every 3 meetings.
Every
But
other.
if,
620.1 is the building heights. No building shall be constructed or altered to exceed more than 3 stories or 35 feet in height. That's measured to halfway between the gable line and the ridge.
Mhm.
The maximum height to ridge being 40 feet. In each case, that height is measured vertically from the average finished grade of the ground adjoining such building to the highest point of the roof, etc. Which would mean, for instance, if the statement that the foundation is coming out of the ground for a distance of 18 feet, the point that you measure from is where the foundation comes out of the ground. So whatever that dimension is to the first floor is counted against your height limit. And you do that if it's necessary and things are close, and we've done it before, at 1 foot intervals around the entire perimeter of the foundation, and you average those dimensions, and that's how you get your height.
So with that, the front could be at one, could appear to be at one height and the huge tall back.
Yes.
Well, yes, if the ground is sloping away, a walkout basement, for example, is
Right.
an easy visualization.
Which this will be.
There is a
This will be a
considerable-
walkout basement.
There's a considerable grade of this property, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you estimate from the walkout basement to the,
I estimate that we are going to meet the bylaw, because I haven't asked for a variance from it.
Right.
And if you approve this, I have to meet the bylaw, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, and I think some of the measurements that Jim was referring to, if you stand in the marsh or you stand in certain areas, so, but we measure from the,
Of course.
where the house
Right.
sits, so that's some of the discrepancy. So the house isn't going to be 50 or 60 feet, it's just from.
Yeah,
where you
there's,
stood.
there's not an 18-foot foundation going in the back with 60 feet of house on top of it, so.
no, I know that, but the total from the back, from the total height from the back?
I
Would it
don't
be
know what the,
60
it,
Well,
all I
it
know
was
is we're
40
gonna,
feet.
when you average it around the house, it's
Right.
designed so that it meets the bylaw.
Yeah. You know, I tell you, I still don't get how they do that, but it's not my job, so I don't worry about
well, in
Bob
order
will-
for it to be
Bob will make
60
sure
feet
that we
tall in
do.
the back,
it. You'd have
it
to
would have to be 30 feet tall in the,
No,
it would have to be
20.
20 feet tall in the front on average, so it's not gonna be 60 feet tall in the back.
I don't know.
So if I could push back just,
Sure.
it seems to me that Mr. Borkman is stipulating on the conformity of the property, so it's more than, if we're here to discuss the non-conforming nature of the site, that's a much larger conversation. I don't believe we set that to be the conversation this evening. There are deed variances that go right back to the initial separation of this property from mine. In fact, the original road frontage was only 38 feet at a time when the 50-foot road frontage was appropriate. And actually, the question of whether he has enough, a full 40,000 square feet of upland is itself highly contestable. This happens to be the present AE zone overlay of the property as compared to the footprint of the property, showing that there is considerable amount of land that gets put into what that would have to be considered wetland by this measure. So whether, in fact, we want to argue the question of whether he has non-conforming law or not, but the areas are larger. Not only is this the 100-foot floodplain, but we have easily a dozen photographs of this past winter alone where and I'd be happy to provide these to you, where the flooded land is beyond 100-foot elevation. So this is not a once in 100-year event. This is now many times a season event at least, as, so it's not fair to say that this, it reverts to a simple measure of setbacks.
Well,
The issue is, and Scituate zoning bylaw, say, look, I know you think that I'm I know you think that I'm sort of sitting up here reasonably uninformed. I hope you understand I've tried to do my homework, but I also am well aware, I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said that it's a foolish man who, the man who represents himself in a court of law has got a
I actually think you've done quite well, and
Yeah, no
it's
kidding.
very clear you've done your homework.
If this situation, take the issue of nonconformity writ large, however we want to define it, and whether we want to back off and look at where the nonconformity lies, that's an issue separate. I believe that the reason we're here is that Mr. Borkland has stipulated to the very fact that it's a non-conforming lot by whatever measures, but it's not so simple as setback requirements. And as soon as it isn't as simple as setback requirements, then Borkland versus Norwell becomes a huge issue. A huge issue, because all of the things, here, this is a summary of Borkland.
I'm familiar with the case.
Everybody.
That lot was too small.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with
That lot was too small, this lot is not.
That's right.
That was the nonconformity.
That's not the case here, though.
There.
Right.
This lot is not too small. And I understand I understand its
Could be
proximity
argued. It
to the
could be
water.
argued.
Well, but the folks who are arguing that it's of sufficient size are a registered surveyor, our familiarity with the lot, and the zoning code. And unfortunately, for your point, they win quite handily in this situation.
Well, again, Doherty versus Scituate Board, and the Scituate Planning Board established a whole different standard for what those floodlines do to property value, property areas.
Flooding is a different issue, absolutely.
But, yeah, that's not.
Yeah.
You know, again, I'm not here to argue this point. I am here to ask you to consider that this is I made my impassioned plea, if you will, but I believe, and I have good authority to believe that I'm on solid legal ground in asking you to weigh carefully the larger issues involved with this construction. And if you misheard me, then forgive me. My issue is not that it's not the not in my backyard piece, although that is significant. The issue is that my neighborhood, and I believe this is where this town has an opportunity to extend Borkland versus Norwell. In that argument, the neighborhood was seen to include all kinds of things, and they're quite clearly elaborated. My contention is that our neighborhood, as I've tried to demonstrate and convince my neighbors for many, many years, our neighborhood extends to the wetlands. Our neighborhood extends to our responsibility to maintain proper relationship to that wetlands, and by every measure, this house can be claimed to be having a greater deleterious impact to the property, to the neighborhood, and to the marsh. And therefore, I believe it is entirely within the propriety of this board to reject the permit proposal. There's no reason nobody's gonna tell him he can't at least rebuild a modest house on the present site. No one would stand in the way of that. Whether he can extend the 20% beyond that, that's an issue that would come back before the board. But this proposal is so far out of line that it requires more than just my objection. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
sir.
don't think I can make my case more clearly. I would, however, for what it's worth,
If you want to submit a copy of that for the
I
record
have
too.
copies for each of you.
We'll have,
Oh, good.
yep, you
I
keep
have
watching.
copies for each of you, and I do, there is an extension too under the wetlands, the stormwater regulation. I believe Mr. Borkland is misleading you here as well. He's argued consistently before conservation that he doesn't intend to get to a stormwater hearing at all. It's quite different than what I'm hearing in here. I also have enough to gather and leave it with you, enough of the body of what's been discussed in conservation to I think, substantiate my claims here this evening, but I'll be happy to leave those with you.
My only comment on the stormwater is I pulled out those regulations, also have a separate page, and I'm like, why does he think he's gonna talk about that here? That's just not for us at all. And it's not for us to make a decision whether or not he needs to go before planning on stormwater. And,
Oh, no, I don't,
yeah,
he brought that before you. not me.
right, yeah. So I, I don't know if he needs to or not. Somebody will decide, somebody smarter than me.
Well, if you would be so kind, read the afterword on the remarks I made, because I do address that. It's unlike what you said, it's pretty determined to get it out of conservation, and by getting it into plans, he can do that. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions too from anyone else in the audience? Comments? Steve?
I'm Adam Whitman, I live at 61 Border Street,
Yep.
so I'm right behind the proposed site. And Jim is obviously at home, we've only been here a year and a half. We understand that pre-existing our home, the side of our home, went through a lot of issues here in town, but we love it here, and we're willing to be great neighbors. And, here to support our neighborhood, Jim, Steve's a neighbor, so whatever you guys find, we'll accept. Obviously, we're, not in my backyard is something that everybody kind of, doesn't want to see some monstrosity put up in front of them, whether it's 20 feet or 60 feet, all of a sudden the sun's blocked out and I don't have any, we bought the property knowing full well that someone could buy behind us. Could have been us, we had enough money.
It's for sale.
I was gonna
understand
say.
that. I mean,
We have a kid
we-
going to
we-
college.
We've been informed by many a broker that the house is for sale, so, again, I can't express enough, the passion that Jim has, the work that he's done, and, we're very much looking to be good neighbors to everybody.
Yeah.
That's to Jim, to Steve, left and right of us. We care about where we live. I grew up in Cohasset, actually, down the street from Steve. And we love this area, that's why we came back. And Scituate is a special town, a town that we're happy to be in, so, obviously we have concerns. We're probably the biggest neighbor affected by any change there. But happy to go through this process and see how it meets up.
Thank you. Because again, we only have a certain amount of control over what we can do. We have a certain piece of the pie. We don't have the whole pie here. There's other boards that will look at other concerns with this, and ours being the zoning, again, the nonconformities and what's before us. We can't always dive into other stuff, although we might have an opinion for it, but we don't have any teeth to enforce it. We just can't go in that area.
I will say I would be interested in the stormwater aspect of everything, because we moved here, and we have a couple of crop circles in our yard with PVC piping and taking up a considerable amount of our yard space, so.
That will be addressed Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but at some point that.
But what'll happen, as far as the stormwater is concerned, if we are under 15,000 square feet of disturbance by definition in the stormwater bylaw, which we are, we're at 14,600. It doesn't require a stormwater permit. And we will be working with the Whitmans. Before they purchased the house, that property had to go through a stormwater issue, and he's above where we are, so we're basically accepting all the water from that site. So we are gonna be working with them to try to take care of that, because we wanna make sure that the water's handled. So that will be, going forward, that'll be handled, but again, we don't kick in the threshold that requires a stormwater permit.
I hate to be
Just,
And if we do, we will not receive a building permit until we get one of those. But if we are under, we'll receive a building permit without having to deal with a stormwater permit. It doesn't mean we don't have to take care of our stormwater, it's just a different process.
some of that is in the building code as to where you.
Yeah, if there's
disturb-
infiltrators involved and roof runoff and things like that, we will handle that stuff, we always do. Whether it requires a permit or not from the town, we still take care of the stormwater.
Now, will you,
It's something that's designed into it.
will you be also presenting to the board as to why you don't trigger that, information, that why you don't trigger the stormwater?
I'm sure when we apply for a building permit, our building
That
inspector
threshold.
will take it to the proper authorities to find out whether or not they agree with us or not. It's, the stormwater I don't want to get into this too much. The stormwater bylaw is so confusing in this town, okay? I don't believe there's anybody in the town hall that can actually tell you exactly how it's supposed to work. We are working diligently to try to make it simpler, okay? And it's been years that we've been doing this, but it's now back in again. They're forming a committee to try to get it corrected so that it's not extremely expensive for people to do additions on their homes as far as the stormwater is concerned. But it is, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it is the worst bylaw this town has ever come up with. And you just, I could twist you up completely on what you're supposed to do with it. But the reality of it is, if I'm not disturbing 15,000 square feet based on the definition, I'm not required to have a stormwater permit. If the town determines that I'm disturbing more than that, they'll require me to get the permit. If I go to get the permit based on the reading of the bylaw and the regulations that were made by our ex-town planner, it says if I have other hearings involved in the process, the planning board shall be the permit granting authority for a stormwater permit. If it's only the Conservation Commission, and the only public hearing that I have is in front of Conservation for an order of conditions, they would grant the stormwater permit. The confusion on some people is coming in where I'm in front of the Conservation Commission. I did not request a stormwater permit because they have no authority to give me one if I needed one. Because my hearing with you guys, okay, I'm required to go to the planning board for that public hearing. Okay, so I actually have to go to 3 different places because I'm in front of the zoning board. That was never the intent when they wrote the bylaw, but again, it has nothing to do with you guys other than I had to put it in the ad. Because it says in the bylaw, I have to put it in the ad.
So will you be going to planning board?
No, not unless somebody determines that I'm disturbing over 15,000 square feet of land area. And based on the definitions in there of what disturbance is and what disturbance is not, and what's exempt from the bylaw, I'm disturbing 14,600 square feet, which is under 15,000. So as long as the proper authorities tell me that we have done that correctly, I don't need a stormwater permit. If they tell me something different, I'll be in front of the planning board for a stormwater permit.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but I can't sit here and listen to this. Mr. Borkman knows better. There are 3 conditions, and you can get very clear. There are 3 conditions that trigger a stormwater review. One is impervious
Surface.
impervious land. The second is the 15,000 square foot limit, and incredulously, he's only 400 feet. That's 1.5 times the size of this room underneath that limit. And the third is whether he has 1,000 feet, whether he has at least 1,000 feet of disturbed land in a slope of greater than 4 to 1 or 25%. And clearly the topographical map shows that he has consistently attempted to misrepresent not just this, but so many other things before each of the boards before them. And he's just made the point. He's just made the point of why he introduced that language into ZBA because he wants to get it before planning because he doesn't want the Conservation Commission to scrutinize. That's why he's done this. And Conservation knows it too.
And I'm assuming conservation will take care of it.
I hope so.
Steve,
I
is
hope
there,
so, but-
is there wetlands on this property?
There is a small portion of wetlands down, this is the wetland line down here.
Well, that, oh, just that,
So there's a little pocket right here. That's wet.
okay.
Oh, man, I would like to.
And that, the map that you're showing us is, who is that from, was that Paul's?
That's what's, yeah, that's
So that's
done by
what's-
Is that
Paul.
in-
That's
is
what's
that-
in front of conservation
All
for
right.
the order of conditions.
Should we have a
Copy
copy of that too, for
Sure.
our file?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's uplands.
And
This is an articulation of this whole thing. These,
All right, just, I know just a minute, but unless your map is by a registered
I do.
land
I
surveyor.
do. I got John Grady's map from 2015, which draws this line up, it's straight up here, and this line up here. But when they first proposed this thing, Grady put it here. I got Mirabito's, who didn't hear it, he's still here. Mirabito's line drew it to here, and then came out here, and then Holmes came back and redrew the line. 3 times it was redrawn, but using the same data.
Yeah, and again, we're not discussing wetlands, but we're
The question-
accepting that map today. We can't, you could get.
Yeah, we can't decide the
We can't
issue.
decide what issue. This is the registered
Except the-
map that we have.
Well,
There, it could
except
change.
Conservation hasn't accepted it yet.
Well, we're
That's
taking,
theirs, that's theirs.
That's right.
that's the one that's before that, but we have to accept what the map is there. Yeah, that's the most
can
current
I talk
map.
for 2 minutes on my conservation stuff? Since
Do you,
Since I'm getting beat up pretty good here, I'd like to try to stand up for myself for just a minute.
you realize that right now, everyone sitting up here thinks you don't have to, and so you're not
I
gonna
realize
score
that.
any
I would-
points
I
by
would-
But
doing
anybody
it.
who's watching this on TV is
Well-
gonna make it look like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do here,
But
okay?
I would suggest that you maybe save that conversation for,
Yeah.
Oh, we already went through it at conservation.
well,
That's
I don't
fine.
think we need to
Yeah,
discuss
I think-
that matter here.
That's fine,
that-
it's fine.
Good lawyering always tells you have to figure out when you
I will
need to
be
keep your
quiet
mouth
right
shut.
now, how's
Right.
that? The first.
It's as
Are there
important
any-
at what you don't say.
All right.
That's what you do.
Being no other questions? No?
Yeah.
All right, so
Oh, boy.
come back and discuss through that. Are there any discussions that we have? Yeah, I know we heard some,
I don't
but I
have
still think
any,
our piece of the pie is still.
our piece of the
contingent on
pie, to me, this is a very simple application.
Yeah.
Lot
It's,
frontage.
arguably, as we've always found, someone could say that this house is an intensification of the 50-foot nonconformity. For me, it's pretty clear that
think
that's
it's-
Well,
not,
I don't think that's an issue.
right.
50-foot nonconformity is not an issue at all because it was legal when the house was built.
I understand, but that's why it's here.
I
If the
I
house-
thought it was here because of the side yard setback.
Well, but if he was eliminating the side yard setback, he wouldn't need to be here.
Well, we have a difference of opinion on that.
We do.
I